After seeing these Caran Neocolor II watercolor pastels all over the place for a long time, I found them on sale and decided to add them to my art supply collection. In this video, I'll take you through the unboxing and initial swatching that I did when I first opened the set, and then I'll show you the first thing that I created with them. So let's talk about packaging first. So I actually got my set from a local art supply store and I ordered it with other things. So it came in the mail in a box, and the package itself is pretty minimal. It just is shrink wrapped in plastic, unfortunately. But other than that, it doesn't really have any other packaging. There is this cardboard sleeve that I don't know if it's really cardboard, it's like a paper sleeve so that you can recycle that. And otherwise, it's just the tin. Inside the tin, there is a set of stickers and a small vellum insert with information. And as you can see, there's a foam strip at the top of the crayons. And I believe it's just to keep them from banging around when they're in transit. So it's actually really difficult to use them, to take them in and out with that foam strip. So I eventually just removed it. As for the range of colors, I really think that the range in this set of 30 is quite nice. It doesn't feel too limited, but it also doesn't feel like you have too many either. The only comment that I'll make is, for me personally, after I swatched them, it felt like the purple shades were quite close in the colors, and I feel like I personally don't see myself using so many different shades of purple or needing so many shades of purple. So it felt like there were more purples than I needed, and perhaps it would have been nice to have more earth yellows or like earthy greens or just neutrals. And so that's just my opinion here, but you can see that all the purples are, there's like 3 of them, and they feel different. You can see them visually, they're different, but perhaps I just don't need that range of purples. And so that's just how I felt about that. There are other sets available as well as just single crayons. So if you're curious about how they feel, how they work, how you might integrate them into your own artwork, then you could just start with a few singles and then select the colors that you would want before investing in an entire set. But at the time of this video, I did find sets of 10, 15, 30, 40, and 84, all on Amazon. I'll link them below the video in case you're curious. You can also find these at art supply stores locally, like I did. And I actually got mine during one of the sales that they have during the year. So I felt like it was a good deal. So as for mark making, or the way it makes marks on paper when it's dry, it really feels like the way that I would have expected a wax pastel to feel. It's creamy and it's thick, and you're not going to get really fine lines because you're using a crayon, and it definitely leaves a texture on paper, especially the cold press that I'm using here. So the paper I'm swatching on is cold pressed watercolor paper, so it has a texture to it, and you can see that the wax crayon will skip over that and leave little white spots. I think it's a really beautiful way to add texture or to see texture. It's not going to be smooth and totally solid. And just to explain the way I'm doing my swatch card here, my plan here was to do a dry mark, which is the long one that you see at the top, and then the dot at the bottom. The plan there was to activate the dot and then pull the water down so I could see what it looks like when water gets added to the wax pastel. Now I'm just going through every single color one by one, and I'm swatching them in the order that they showed up in the tin, in hopes that I can use this as a reference and that I will keep all of the colors in the same place in the tin. But I will likely just reference and look up what order the colors come in and write them on the back, or just write them on the back before it gets mixed up, so I kind of have an idea, because I'm not leaving any room here to write the names, but it would be a good idea if you want to know the names of the colors to leave some room so you can write it there. All right, so I'm just going to speed up the rest of this dry mark making process, and I'll be back when I start adding water. So when I started to add water to these marks, I think I assumed that it would require some work to activate the color, but that was really not the case at all. I was really surprised to see that the color was immediately activated, as you can see in the video. And not only that, it felt pretty creamy and was more vibrant than I expected. So if you can imagine getting like the tiniest glob of fresh paint out of the tube and putting it on the tip of your brush, getting it wet and then applying it to paper, that's sort of what I mean by creamy. Like I activated, I guess, or rehydrated so quickly, and you can feel the crayon kind of pull down and become part of the water in such a easy way that, like I said, it was very surprising to me. I was pleasantly surprised. So I think I'll leave you here and time lapse the rest of the swatching process for the water. So you can just kind of see how all of the colors came out, what they look like when they're activated. They actually look quite a bit more vibrant than they do when they're dry, which is really beautiful. So I'll leave you there with that, and I'll come back and share with you some of the experiments I did with the crayons after that. So after creating the swatch card, I decided to do a little bit of testing in a larger format. And so I just got a scratch piece of paper and I took a color and I just colored a large area with the crayon and decided I would wet it and then see what happens if I wet it a little bit versus a lot, and to see how then the rehydrated or hydrated watercolor or wax soluble pastel would react when I dropped in a lot of water, as if I was working very wet. I just wanted to push the medium and see what would happen before actually using it on a drawing. So here I'm just wetting it. You can see that the texture remains underneath, especially if you're just kind of doing a light wash of water over the top. It activates the color, but the texture and the marks stay underneath until you start to scrub it or brush it a lot more. And then you can pretty much almost dissolve all of the texture away and then begin to drop water in it, and it starts to behave like watercolor paint, which is really interesting. So you can see that you can choose whether you want to, I guess the word I would use is blend out the wax pastel entirely, or leave a little bit of that texture behind, or you can do a combination. So I think this is what was really interesting to me, is once completely hydrated, the wax pastel really acts a lot like I had just been using watercolor paint, which is really interesting. I think the one thing to know about this is that if you are going to be using this wax pastel in combination with watercolor, or kind of dissolving it out so it behaves like watercolor, that it's easy to forget that if you come back and start to layer or glaze, that those parts of the crayon that weren't activated will still activate. So there's this possibility of blending that or mixing on the paper that might not be anticipated, or it's harder, I guess, in that way to plan out, because if you have multiple colors on your sheet and you start to use water, they'll all mix together. So that's just something I think to know. I don't have enough experience yet to really know a good way to work with it, or whether or not it activates a lot or a little, but just, something to kind of think about. You can also, like I just did, drop water that's just clean onto paper and then draw the water soluble wax pastel in it, and then it starts to do some blending, which creates a really interesting effect as well. So I said I would share the first thing that I created with these water soluble wax pastels, and it happened to be a tiny spread in my sketchbook, and I chose to do it on a part of it. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I think, when you first get a new medium, you just want to experiment. And so I thought, hey, what is it going to look like if I just draw the whole thing with crayon and then come back and apply water to parts of it and see what happens. Because I did want some definition in this. It's like the top of a temple in Bali. I wanted to keep some definition and texture, but I also wanted to have a little bit of watercolor feel to it. So that's what I did. I don't think I would use it this way again, just like in a reflection. When I was reflecting about this when I was doing it, I like the texture that it leaves behind. I like the fact that you can draw and then add water to make it look like watercolor paint. But I think for something like this that's so refined, I don't know if I would do it again this way. I think I like it as an accent. I like it as a way to create texture. But again, I really have only done a little bit of work with these new pastels. And so I don't really know how I want to use them, but I think it's overall a really nice way to add texture. So to sum up this unboxing and swatching video, I just wanted to share my overall first impression. I think in summary, I can really attest to the fact that these are of really good quality. They reflect the cost because these aren't cheap, and they are quite, an investment if you want to buy a whole set like this, especially if you want to buy the entire, let's say, 84 color set. And so they're not inexpensive. And the quality, though, like I was saying, is really good. You're going to get a great water-soluble wax pastel that hydrates with water and creates really beautiful texture. The colors are vibrant, and they're actually really, really fun to work with. I have yet to really get into exploring them, like I said before, but I did experiment with them on a small sketch, and I feel like it's going to be really fun to test this out and use this in different formats, different mediums, different types of drawings. And I hope that this video was helpful in case you were curious about these watercolor pastels. And I'd love to hear if you're curious about trying them out, if you had been thinking about them for a long time like me, or if you already use them and how you like to use them in your work. I'd love to know. Leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.